She collapsed in the desert with nothing left. A cowboy took her home instead of riding on. The twin suns burned down on the endless desert, painting the sand in shades of gold and orange that shimmered like liquid fire. The wind carried nothing but fine, dry grains that stung the skin and made breathing difficult. There was no shade for miles, and the horizon seemed to stretch forever, unbroken, unforgiving. Lyra stumbled through the dunes, her boots sinking into the soft sand with every step. Her throat was dry, her lips cracked, and her eyes squinted against the glaring sunlight. Her spacecraft had crashed hours ago, or perhaps it had been days. Time had become meaningless in the scorching heat. She didn't know how she had survived this long, only that her body was failing her now. She tried to take a step, then another, but her legs gave way. The sand rushed to meet her, soft and suffocating as she fell to her knees. She gasped, her chest aching, her vision swimming in heat waves. Every instinct inside her screamed for rest, for water, for safety, but there was nothing. The desert had taken everything from her ship, her supplies, even the hope that had kept her moving. For a moment she thought she might simply stay there, kneeling in the sand, letting the heat claim her. But a small, stubborn voice inside whispered that she couldn't give up yet. Somehow, she had to survive. Somehow, she had to keep moving. From the corner of her eye, she saw a shadow moving across the dunes. At first, she thought it was a trick of the sunlight, another mirage meant to mock her. But it was real. A figure on a hoverbike appeared, kicking up a swirl of sand behind him. His silhouette was sharp against the sky, a lone cowboy riding across the endless desert. Lyra's heart leapt with a mixture of fear and hope. Who was he? Why would anyone come here to this desolate stretch of sand where nothing could survive? The cowboy slowed as he approached, the hoverbike hovering just above the ground. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a wide-brimmed hat that shaded his face from the sun. Dust clung to his clothes and his eyes were calm, steady, and watchful. He looked at Lyra, taking in her collapsed form, the worn-out clothes and the exhaustion etched into her face. "Hey," he called out in a low, steady voice. "You all right there?" Lyra tried to answer, but her throat burned, and all that came out was a rasping whisper. She shook her head. She wanted to say yes, wanted to ask for help, but the words wouldn't come. The cowboy didn't hesitate. He switched off the hoverbike and knelt beside her, his hand gentle as he touched her shoulder. "Don't try to move too fast," he said. "You've been out here too long, I can help." Lyra wanted to believe him, but fear and pride held her back. Why stop?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Why not just leave me here?" The cowboy smiled faintly, a hint of warmth in the harsh desert. "Because you're still alive," he said, "and alive folks deserve a chance." That simple answer was enough. Lyra felt something stir inside her, hope, fragile but real. She nodded weakly and the cowboy helped her stand. She was light as a feather in his strong arms, and together they made their way to the hoverbike. The ride was rough, the hoverbike bouncing over dunes and carving paths through the sand, but it was far better than what Lyra could have managed on her own. She closed her eyes, letting herself be carried, letting the wind wash over her face and the heat fade behind the hum of the bike's engines. After what felt like hours, the desert began to change. The endless sand gave way to jagged rocks, scattered shrubs, and the occasional cactus-like plant. In the distance, Lyra saw a cluster of buildings, small but sturdy, built from salvaged metal and wood. Smoke curled lazily from a chimney, and solar panels glinted in the sunlight. "Home," the cowboy said simply. Lyra opened her eyes. The word made her heart beat faster. She didn't know whose home this was, but it was a place of safety, a place that promised shelter, food, and water. For the first time in a long while, she felt the weight of exhaustion ease, replaced by something she hadn't felt in days: relief. The cowboy guided her down the hoverbike and into the compound. A dog-like creature with metallic limbs padded over, sniffing her curiously before sitting obediently by the cowboy's side. "This is Rust," he said. "He's harmless mostly." Lyra smiled weakly. It was strange, seeing a living creature with such loyalty in the middle of the desert. The cowboy led her inside, where the interior was warm, dim, and surprisingly comfortable. Tools hung neatly on the walls, a small kitchen area had pots simmering with water, and a soft bed was tucked in a corner, ready for her. "Rest," the cowboy said. "You've earned it." Lyra sank onto the bed, the exhaustion overwhelming her. As she drifted into a restless sleep, her mind replayed the events that had brought her here. She had been traveling to a distant colony, carrying vital supplies and research data. Her spacecraft had malfunctioned during a sandstorm, forcing her to crash land in the desert. She had lost everything, her work, her belongings, even her sense of direction. And now, by chance or fate, she had found a man who chose compassion over indifference. Hours later, she awoke to the scent of fresh water and bread. The cowboy was sitting nearby, a small cup in his hand. "Drink this," he said. "You need it more than I do." Lyra accepted it gratefully. The water felt like fire in her throat at first, then cool relief as it traveled down to her stomach. She drank slowly, savoring each sip. The bread followed, dry but filling, and she felt strength return bit by bit. As she ate, she looked around the room, noticing the small touches of life. A collection of books, a few plants thriving in small pots, and sketches of stars on the walls. The cowboy noticed her gaze. "Not much," he said, "but it's enough. The desert is harsh, but you make it softer with care. That's all we can do out here." Lyra nodded. She wanted to ask questions, so many questions, but she realized that for now, she simply needed to be. To rest, to recover, to exist without fear. Later that evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and purple, the cowboy and Lyra sat outside. The air had cooled, and the desert seemed to breathe softly around them. "You survived out there for a long time," he said, gazing at the horizon. "Most people don't last more than a day in this heat." Lyra shivered at the memory. "I don't know how," she admitted. "I just kept moving." "That's human strength," he said quietly. "The ability to keep going, even when everything is against you, even when you've got nothing left." Lyra looked at him, realizing that this wasn't just about surviving the desert. It was about surviving in the universe, in life itself. Humans had a way of enduring, of finding hope and connection even in the most impossible places. For the first time in days, Lyra allowed herself a small, genuine smile. She didn't know what the future held, or how long she would stay in this strange, quiet outpost. But for now she was safe, and that was enough. The cowboy smiled back, a quiet understanding passing between them. Two souls brought together by chance, finding light in the heart of the desert. And for the first time, Lyra felt that maybe, just maybe, she could find a place where she belonged. The desert was still vast, still harsh, but it no longer felt endless. Somewhere beyond the dunes, a life awaited her. A life of discovery, of courage, and perhaps of companionship. And with that thought, Lyra closed her eyes once more, letting sleep carry her gently into the night. Lyra woke to the soft golden light of dawn streaming through the small window of the desert outpost. The air was cooler than the blazing heat of the day before, and the gentle hum of the hoverbike, now resting quietly outside, mixed with the distant rustle of the desert wind. For the first time in what felt like ages, Lyra stretched her arms and felt strength returning to her limbs. She still felt weak, but not helpless. The cowboy, Cade, was already awake. He moved quietly, preparing a simple breakfast of roasted nuts, dried fruit, and a small loaf of bread. Rust, the half-metallic dog-like creature, padded softly across the floor, nudging Cade's leg for attention before sitting obediently nearby. "You're up early," Lyra said, her voice hoarse but steady. Cade looked up, his wide-brimmed hat casting a shadow over his eyes. "The desert waits for no one," he said simply. "Sun rises, sun sets, and if you waste the morning, the day's gone before you know it." Lyra nodded. She wanted to ask questions, but first she needed to eat. She sat at the small table and Cade poured water into a metal cup, passing it to her. The cool liquid was a relief to her throat, and she drank carefully, savoring the feeling of hydration. "Where am I?" she asked after a moment, her curiosity overcoming her fatigue. Cade smiled faintly. "At the edge of nowhere," he said. "But that's not all. This is my home. I've been out here a long time, building it little by little. It's not much, but it keeps me alive." Lyra looked around, taking in the small comforts of the outpost. Tools hung neatly on the walls, pots and pans lined the shelves, and a few pots of thriving plants added a touch of green to the otherwise metallic and dusty interior. The place smelled faintly of wood smoke and herbs. "It's nice," she said softly. "I didn't think anyone could live out here." "You'd be surprised," Cade replied. "The desert teaches you to adapt, to use what you have and make the most of it." As they ate, Lyra's mind wandered. She remembered her spacecraft, the crash, the endless sand dunes, and the feeling of hopelessness when she thought she was alone. And now, here she was, sitting in a small desert home with someone who had chosen to help her without asking for anything in return. It was a strange, almost unreal feeling. After breakfast, Cade led her outside. The desert stretched endlessly beyond the outpost, but there was life here too, small shrubs, hardy flowers, and the occasional desert creature darting across the sand. Cade walked toward a low tower built from salvaged metal and wood, motioning for Lyra to follow. "This is my lookout," he said. "From up there I can see the desert for miles. It helps me know what's coming, what's safe, and what's not." Lyra climbed the steps slowly, still weak from the desert ordeal, and looked out over the horizon. The view was breathtaking. Rolling dunes melted into rocky ridges, and the sky blazed with the morning sun. In the distance she could see faint trails of movement, small, almost invisible, but enough to remind her that the desert was never truly empty. "People come through sometimes," Cade said. "Travelers, traders, wanderers. Most pass by, but some stay. The ones who stay learn something important. Survival isn't just about strength. It's about kindness, patience, and using your mind." Lyra thought about those words carefully. She had relied on her knowledge, her quick thinking, and sheer determination to survive the crash and navigate the dunes. And now, she realized, she had also relied on someone else's kindness. Cade hadn't had to stop for her, hadn't had to help her, but he did. Over the next few days, Lyra slowly regained her strength. She helped Cade with small tasks around the outpost, collecting water from a nearby well, tending the small garden of desert plants, and organizing supplies. It was hard work, but each task made her feel stronger, more capable, and more connected to the world around her. Cade watched her silently, occasionally offering advice or pointing out a better way to carry water or fix a tool. But mostly, he let her work at her own pace. "You'll do fine," he said one evening as they repaired a small windmill that powered their water pump. "You just need to trust yourself." Lyra smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. Trusting herself was easier said than done, but for the first time she felt like she could. One evening, after a long day of work, Lyra and Cade sat outside watching the twin suns set. The sky was painted in colors she had never seen, deep purples blending into fiery oranges, soft pinks melting into gold. Rust lay curled beside them, breathing softly. "Tell me about yourself," Lyra said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Why do you live out here? Why not go somewhere safer?" Cade leaned back, resting on his hands. "I grew up on the frontier," he said slowly. "My parents taught me that life is about more than comfort. It's about resilience, about facing challenges head-on. The desert, well, it's harsh, but it keeps me sharp. It keeps me human." Lyra listened carefully. There was a quiet wisdom in his words, a sense of purpose that went beyond survival. She thought about her own life before the crash, racing from one colony to another, always busy, always worried about deadlines, always alone. Here, in the quiet desert, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, peace. Over the following week, Cade began teaching her more practical skills: how to identify edible desert plants, how to conserve water, and how to navigate the dunes using the position of the twin suns. Lyra learned quickly, her curiosity and determination shining through. She discovered that her knowledge of engineering from her past life was useful too. She helped improve the outpost's solar panels, repaired a broken irrigation system, and even rigged a small water filtration device from old parts. Cade watched her work with quiet approval. "You've got a good mind," he said one evening. "Most people wouldn't think to do that. Most people just complain or give up." Lyra felt a swell of pride. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving, she was contributing, making a difference, and learning that she had value beyond her past failures. One afternoon, as Lyra explored the area around the outpost, she stumbled across a small, abandoned shelter partially buried in sand. Inside, she found old tools, tattered clothing, and a journal. Curious, she picked up the journal and opened it. The pages were filled with notes about desert survival, sketches of the landscape, and careful observations of the animals and plants. Someone had lived here before, someone who had learned to respect and understand the desert. When she showed it to Cade, he nodded. "Many people have come through this desert. Some stay, some leave. But those who learn, they leave behind pieces of themselves, lessons for the next traveler." Lyra felt a strange connection to the unknown author. She realized that she was now part of that chain, learning, surviving, leaving something behind for others in the future. Evenings were the best part of the day. The desert cooled, and the sky filled with stars, brighter and more numerous than she had ever seen. Cade and Lyra would sit outside, talking about life, the universe, and the small victories of the day. Rust would lie between them, keeping them company, his metal limbs softly reflecting starlight. "You know," Lyra said one night, "I never thought I'd find a place like this. A home. Not just walls and shelter, but peace." Cade smiled faintly, his gaze on the stars. "Home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's the people around you, the choices you make, and the care you show. You found that here, and you helped make it better." Lyra felt warmth spread through her chest. She realized that survival wasn't just about enduring hardships. It was about building something meaningful, even in a harsh world. The desert had taken everything from her, but it had also given her something unexpected, a chance to start anew. As the days passed, Lyra's strength returned fully. She could walk the dunes without faltering, work long hours around the outpost, and even ride on Cade's hoverbike, learning to navigate the desert herself. Each day brought new challenges, but with Cade's guidance and her own growing confidence, she faced them head-on. One morning, as the sun rose, painting the sand in brilliant gold, Cade handed her a small, simple map. "This is the area around the outpost," he said. "Learn it, understand it. One day you might need it." Lyra took the map, feeling a sense of responsibility and pride. She was no longer the helpless traveler who had collapsed in the desert. She was a survivor, a learner, and now, a protector of this small corner of the harsh world. As she looked out over the dunes, she realized something profound. The desert was still vast, still challenging, but it was no longer a place of despair. It was a place of opportunity, of growth, and of human ingenuity. And with Cade by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. The desert was teaching her not just to survive, but to thrive. And for the first time in a long while, Lyra felt truly alive. The desert never truly slept. Even in the quiet moments, the wind whispered through the dunes, carrying secrets of travelers, animals, and the land itself. Lyra had grown accustomed to the rhythm of the outpost, waking with the suns, tending the garden, checking water supplies, and learning more about survival with Cade. Yet, she sensed that peace in the desert was fragile. Something could disturb it at any moment. One afternoon, while she worked on repairing a small solar panel with Cade, she noticed a faint shimmer on the horizon. At first, it looked like a heat mirage, dancing and wavering with the sun. But as she squinted, she realized it wasn't a trick of light. There were shapes moving across the dunes, too organized, too purposeful to be wandering animals. "Cade," she called, pointing toward the horizon. "Do you see that?" He followed her gaze, his expression calm but alert. "I see it," he said. "Travelers or maybe trouble." Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. Even with all she had learned, the desert could be dangerous. People could be harsh, desperate, or worse, careless of others' lives. But Cade didn't panic. He walked over to his hoverbike, his movements precise and confident. "We need to prepare," he said. "Nothing too fancy, just some simple defenses and ways to slow them down if they get too close. We won't fight, we'll outsmart." Lyra nodded. Her heart raced, but she trusted him. Together, they moved around the outpost, placing small, clever traps, piles of sand that would shift to reveal warning markers, reflective metal panels to catch sunlight and signal movement, and simple sound devices that could alert them to anyone approaching. Cade explained each method as they worked. "The desert teaches you to see more than what's in front of you," he said. "It teaches you to think, to notice, to plan. That's how you survive out here." Lyra absorbed his words, realizing that survival wasn't just about endurance. It was about foresight, intelligence, and understanding your environment. She began to anticipate his instructions, helping place the traps and devices with confidence. By late afternoon, the shapes on the horizon had grown clearer. A group of travelers approached, not hostile but clearly in search of water, supplies, and rest. They were cautious, scanning the desert as though uncertain of what they would find. Lyra and Cade observed from a hidden ridge, deciding how to respond. "They look tired," Lyra said. "Should we help them?" Cade considered the group carefully. "We can't just let anyone wander in," he said. "But we can guide them safely, show them the rules of the desert without putting ourselves at risk." As the group drew closer, Cade rode out on his hoverbike, Rust following at his side. Lyra stayed back, keeping watch from the ridge, ready to assist if needed. Cade's presence alone seemed to calm the travelers. He spoke to them with quiet authority, explaining the dangers of the desert and offering safe paths to follow. Lyra watched in awe as he guided them. His words were firm but kind, his tone patient. Within moments, the travelers understood the unspoken rules. Water is precious, movement is careful, and respect for the desert and each other is essential. Once the travelers moved on, Cade returned to the outpost. "See," he said, "no need for conflict. Sometimes you just need to show the right way." Lyra smiled, feeling a new sense of confidence. She had been frightened at first, but now she understood that threats in the desert didn't always come from violence. Sometimes they came from unpreparedness, from ignorance, from failing to respect the land. The next morning, Lyra awoke to a bright sky and a gentle breeze. Cade was already outside, checking the traps and devices they had placed the day before. He noticed her and waved her over. "Time to learn something new," he said. "The desert isn't just sand and sun. It's alive. It tells stories if you know how to listen." He led her to a high ridge overlooking the dunes. "See those patterns in the sand?" he asked. "Wind, water, animals, travelers, they all leave traces. You learn to read them, and you can predict what's coming before it's even visible." Lyra studied the sand, noticing subtle ridges and depressions she had never paid attention to before. "So these lines, they tell a story?" she asked. Cade nodded. "Exactly. Every movement leaves a mark. The desert never lies. If you learn to watch, you'll survive more than just the heat. You'll survive the people, the animals, and the storms." Over the following days, Lyra practiced reading the desert. She learned to spot the tracks of desert creatures, to follow faint trails of water, and even to predict when a sandstorm might form. Her confidence grew with each small success, and Cade watched her proudly. One afternoon, as Lyra explored a nearby dune, she noticed something unusual, a small device half buried in sand. It looked advanced, unlike anything she had seen in the desert before. She dug it out carefully and examined it. It was a small sensor, likely left by someone monitoring the desert or the travelers passing through. When she showed it to Cade, he frowned thoughtfully. "Someone is watching," he said. "Not dangerous necessarily, but curious. Could be scouts, researchers, or traders. We'll keep an eye out." Lyra felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The desert had always seemed isolated, but now she realized it was part of a larger world, connected in ways she had never imagined. She was learning not just to survive, but to understand, to anticipate, and to participate in the desert's quiet, intricate dance. That evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Cade and Lyra sat outside the outpost, watching the sky turn deep shades of purple and gold. Rust lay nearby, his metallic eyes reflecting the fading light. "You've come a long way," Cade said quietly. "You're not the same person who collapsed in the sand. You're stronger, smarter, and more aware of what matters." Lyra smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. Cade shook his head. "No, you did it yourself. I just guided you a little. That's what humans do. We help each other, we learn from each other, and we survive together." The next morning brought new challenges. A group of traders arrived, seeking guidance through the desert. They were polite, careful, but inexperienced. Cade and Lyra worked together, guiding them safely, sharing knowledge about water conservation, safe paths, and desert etiquette. Lyra realized she had learned enough to take the lead at times, giving directions and advice with confidence. She felt a sense of pride and belonging she had never known before. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a teacher, a guide, and a partner in protecting this small corner of the world. As the days turned into weeks, Lyra and Cade faced minor challenges: a sudden sandstorm, a small injury to rust, and the need to repair solar panels after strong winds. But each challenge strengthened their bond and their understanding of the desert. They discovered that survival was about more than endurance. It was about knowledge, foresight, and cooperation. One evening, while they watched the sunset, Lyra noticed a faint glimmer on the horizon again. This time it was accompanied by movement, figures traveling quickly across the dunes. Cade squinted, his expression serious. "We might have more visitors," he said. "Let us be ready." Lyra nodded, excitement and determination mixing in her chest. She was ready. She had learned the desert's secrets, worked alongside Cade, and discovered her own strength. Whatever came next, she knew they could face it together. The desert was vast, full of challenges and mysteries, but Lyra no longer feared it. She had learned to read its stories, to anticipate its dangers, and to find opportunity where others saw only hardship. And with Cade by her side, she felt a deep sense of purpose and hope. For the first time, Lyra understood the truth Cade had been teaching her all along. The desert was not just a place to survive. It was a place to grow, to learn, and to discover the power of human ingenuity and kindness. As the night settled over the dunes, Lyra stood on the ridge, looking at the stars twinkling above the desert. She felt alive, capable, and ready for whatever the horizon might bring. Shadows might appear, storms might come, but she and Cade would face them, not with fear but with knowledge, courage, and trust. The desert had taught her its lessons, and she had listened. And now she was ready to write her own story in the endless sands. The desert had a rhythm, a quiet order, but it could be broken in an instant. Lyra had learned to read its signs: the subtle shifts in wind, the faint changes in sand, the distant movements on the horizon. Yet nothing could have prepared her for the sudden appearance of a large group of travelers moving toward the outpost. It started in the early morning. Lyra was tending the garden while Cade checked the solar panels. Rust padded around, sniffing the ground and alerting them to minor disturbances. Lyra squinted at the horizon and froze. A line of figures, more numerous than anything she had seen before, moved swiftly across the dunes. Their speed suggested urgency, their formation suggested purpose. "Cade," she called, her voice tight with concern. "There's a lot of them, too many to be normal travelers." Cade turned and followed her gaze. His expression remained calm, but his eyes sharpened. "Looks like we have visitors," he said, his voice steady. "Time to see what they want." Lyra's heart raced. She had faced challenges before: heat, thirst, exhaustion, even guiding other travelers safely. But this was different. There were too many of them, and she couldn't sense whether they were friendly or not. Cade mounted his hoverbike and gestured for Lyra to follow. She climbed on behind him, Russ trotting alongside. Together, they approached the ridge to get a better view. From their vantage point, they could see the group more clearly. They were a mix of travelers, some carrying supplies, others scouting ahead. It was clear they weren't hostile in the sense of seeking violence, but their size and determination suggested they could overwhelm the small outpost if they didn't understand its rules. "Looks like they need guidance," Cade said. "Not conflict, but we'll need a plan." Lyra nodded. Over the past weeks, she had learned much from Cade: how to read the desert, anticipate movement, and use clever methods to manage situations without confrontation. She realized that this was the moment to put those lessons into practice. Together, they prepared the outpost. Simple but effective measures: warning markers made of reflective metal, sand traps to slow any unexpected movement, and sound devices to alert them to changes in the dunes. Cade explained each step as they worked, and Lyra assisted, anticipating his instructions and even suggesting improvements. When the group drew closer, Cade rode out on his hoverbike, Rust beside him. Lyra followed cautiously, ready to step in if needed. As they approached, Cade raised his hand in greeting. "Good morning," he called. "Welcome to the desert outpost. We can help guide you, but you must follow a few simple rules." The travelers slowed, their eyes wide with curiosity and relief. Cade spoke to them calmly, explaining the importance of water conservation, respecting the land, and following safe paths through the dunes. Lyra noticed how the travelers relaxed, listening intently. She stepped forward and added instructions of her own. "If you follow these markers," she said, pointing to the reflective panels, "you can avoid dangerous areas and make it safely to the water source. Work together, watch each other, and don't wander alone." The travelers nodded, clearly impressed by her confidence and knowledge. Lyra felt a sense of pride swell within her. She had gone from a collapsed, helpless stranger to someone capable of teaching and guiding others. As the group moved past the outpost, Cade and Lyra returned to their work. The sun climbed high and the desert heat pressed down, but they worked side by side, reinforcing defenses and preparing for any unexpected changes. Later that afternoon, a small scout from the group returned, panting and waving. "More travelers coming," the scout called. "They're unprepared and moving too fast. Some are carrying too little water." Lyra and Cade exchanged a quick glance. "Then we'll help them too," Cade said. "We'll guide them safely and they'll learn. That's the way of the desert." They moved quickly, setting up additional markers and warning devices along the dunes. Lyra took the lead at times, her confidence growing with each action. She guided travelers to safe paths, offered water, and explained the desert's rules. Cade watched proudly, occasionally stepping in to clarify or demonstrate a technique. By evening, the group had passed safely, and the outpost stood unscathed. Lyra collapsed onto a shaded bench, exhausted but exhilarated. She had never felt so alive. Cade joined her, handing her a cup of water. "You did well today," he said. "More than well. You kept people safe, helped them understand, and you stayed calm. That's not easy in the desert." Lyra smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "I couldn't have done it without you," she admitted. Cade shook his head. "No, you did it yourself. I just guided you a little. That's what humans do. We help, we learn, and we survive together." The next day brought a new challenge. A sandstorm had formed overnight, sweeping across the desert with sudden ferocity. Lyra awoke to the roar of wind and sand battering the outpost. Cade moved quickly, securing doors, tying down loose objects, and checking the water supply. Lyra followed, working alongside him, her muscles aching but determined. Rust barked into the wind, alerting them to weaker points in the outpost. Lyra reinforced the walls and checked the solar panels. Despite the chaos, Cade remained calm, guiding her with quiet instructions. Hours passed, the storm raging outside. Lyra felt fear creep in, but Cade's steady presence and the knowledge she had gained kept her grounded. She realized that the desert had taught her resilience, patience, and resourcefulness. She could face storms, challenges, and uncertainty with courage and intelligence. When the storm finally passed, the desert was transformed. Dunes had shifted, paths were altered, and small debris littered the area. But the outpost had survived intact thanks to their combined efforts. Lyra and Cade stepped outside, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the relief of safety. "You've grown a lot," Cade said, smiling faintly. "You're ready for whatever the desert throws at us." Lyra nodded, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. She had learned more than survival skills. She had discovered the strength of human ingenuity, kindness, and cooperation. She realized that challenges were not just obstacles, they were opportunities to learn, adapt, and grow. That evening, as the twin suns set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Lyra and Cade sat outside, watching the horizon. Rust lay curled between them, tired but content. "You know," Lyra said, "I never imagined I could do so much. I thought I was weak, helpless, and lost, but now I feel capable, alive, and connected. This desert, these challenges, they've made me stronger." Cade nodded. "And you'll keep getting stronger. The desert tests us, but it also teaches us. We learn to see, to think, to act. We learn to survive, yes, but more importantly, we learn to thrive." Lyra looked at him, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you, Cade, for everything." He smiled, a quiet, reassuring smile. "No thanks needed. You earned it yourself." As night fell, Lyra stood on the ridge, looking at the stars emerging in the clear desert sky. She felt a deep sense of purpose and hope. The desert had shown her its challenges, its harshness, and its beauty. And she had faced it all, not alone, but with Cade, Rust, and the knowledge she had gained. The desert would always be unpredictable. Storms could arise, travelers could appear unprepared, and challenges would come without warning. But Lyra no longer feared it. She had learned to read the signs, anticipate the changes, and act with intelligence and courage. In that moment, she understood a profound truth. Humanity thrives not because the world is easy, but because humans adapt, learn, and work together. Even in the harshest conditions, kindness, intelligence, and resilience can turn challenges into victories. Lyra felt a quiet pride in herself. She was no longer the woman who had collapsed in the sand. She was a survivor, a guide, and a part of something larger, the ongoing story of humans enduring and thriving in the universe. As she watched the stars twinkle above the desert, she knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, she and Cade would face it together. And together, they would turn even the harshest trials into opportunities to grow, learn, and live fully. The desert had tested them, and they had proven themselves. And in that proof, Lyra found not just survival, but hope, courage, and a deep connection to the world, and to the people who mattered most. The desert was quiet in the early morning, painted in soft gold and pink by the rising twin suns. Lyra stood at the ridge outside the outpost, letting the cool breeze wash over her. The vast dunes stretched endlessly, yet she no longer felt the fear or hopelessness she had felt when she first arrived. Instead, she felt strength, confidence, and a sense of belonging. Behind her, Cade emerged from the outpost, Rust padding close at his heels. He wore his wide-brimmed hat tilted low against the sun, but his eyes held a warmth that made Lyra smile. The two had shared countless days and challenges together, learning not just to survive but to thrive in the harsh desert. "You're up early," Cade said, leaning against the railing of the ridge. "I like mornings," Lyra replied. "They're quiet, peaceful. And the desert feels different in the morning light. Alive somehow," Cade nodded. "It is alive, and it's been good to you, hasn't it?" Lyra thought about everything she had been through. The crash, the exhaustion, the fear of being alone, and the endless struggle to survive. Then she thought about all she had learned, reading the desert, guiding travelers, repairing the outpost, and even teaching others. She realized that she had changed. She was no longer helpless or afraid. She was capable, confident, and resilient. "Yes," she said softly. "It's been good, better than I could have imagined." Cade smiled faintly. "You've done more than survive, you've grown, and that's what matters. Life is not about avoiding challenges, it's about facing them, learning from them, and helping others along the way." Lyra looked at him, realizing how much she had learned from him, not just about survival, but about life, trust, and the strength of human kindness. Cade had given her guidance, but it was her determination and curiosity that had carried her forward. The morning passed quietly with small tasks around the outpost, checking water supplies, tending the garden, and repairing the solar panels that powered their home. Lyra worked alongside Cade, each movement smooth and confident. Russ trotted nearby, playful and alert. It was a rhythm of life she had come to love, a life of purpose, learning, and cooperation. As the sun climbed higher, a small group of travelers appeared on the horizon, their silhouettes visible against the golden dunes. Lyra and Cade had seen many travelers pass through before, but today was different. Lyra felt a surge of excitement. She had grown confident enough to lead, and today she would take charge. "Let's guide them," she said, turning to Cade. "I think I'm ready." Cade nodded, a proud glint in his eyes. "Go ahead. I'll be right behind you." Lyra stepped forward, Rust at her side, and rode partway on the hoverbike with the travelers. She explained the safe paths, the importance of water, and the subtle signs of the desert that indicated danger or shelter. Her voice was calm, confident, and full of authority, but also warmth. The travelers listened carefully, clearly reassured by her guidance. Cade watched from the ridge, a quiet smile on his face. Lyra had come a long way from the woman who had collapsed in the sand. She had transformed into a capable, thoughtful, and inspiring person, someone who could help others navigate not only the desert, but life's challenges as well. After the travelers passed safely, Lyra returned to the outpost, feeling a sense of pride and fulfillment. She had not just survived the desert, she had become part of its story, a link in the chain of travelers, guides, and protectors who respected and understood its secrets. Later that day, as the twin suns began to set, Cade suggested they take a short journey across the dunes. Lyra agreed eagerly. Riding the hoverbike together, they felt the wind on their faces and the sun warming their backs. The desert, once an endless expanse of danger and fear, now felt like a place of opportunity and beauty. They reached a high ridge, overlooking a valley where small oases and scattered desert plants created a mosaic of life in the harsh environment. Lyra looked out, awed by the sight. "It's amazing," she whispered. "I never imagined there could be so much life here." Cade nodded. "The desert teaches us patience. Life is everywhere if you look closely enough. And humans, we have the ability to protect, nurture, and grow it. That's our strength." Lyra turned to him, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you, Cade. For guiding me, for trusting me, and for showing me that there's more to life than just surviving." He smiled, a quiet, steady smile that carried both warmth and pride. "You don't need to thank me. You earned it. You learned, adapted, and thrived. That's what humans do. That's what makes us strong." As the suns dipped below the horizon, casting the desert in brilliant oranges, pinks, and purples, Lyra felt a deep sense of belonging. She had found a place where she could grow, learn, and contribute. She had discovered the power of human ingenuity, kindness, and resilience. And she had learned that even in the harshest environments, life could flourish if nurtured with care and wisdom. Over the next few days, Lyra and Cade worked together to expand the outpost slightly. They built new shelters for travelers, reinforced the water supply, and planted additional desert plants that could survive the harsh conditions. Lyra found joy in the work, knowing that each improvement could help someone else survive and thrive in the desert. One evening, while resting outside, Lyra spoke. "I've been thinking about the future, about what comes next." Cade raised an eyebrow. "And what do you see?" Lyra smiled softly. "I see this place growing. I see people learning, thriving, and respecting the desert. I see us helping others like you helped me. I want to be part of that." Cade's eyes softened. "Then you will be, and together we can make a difference, one step at a time." The following morning, Lyra took the lead in guiding a small group of new travelers through the desert. Cade followed closely, offering guidance when needed, but allowing Lyra to direct the group. She felt a sense of pride, purpose, and fulfillment unlike anything she had experienced before. The travelers followed her instructions carefully, their trust in her growing with each step. By the time they reached the next oasis, Lyra realized something important. She had transformed from someone lost and helpless into someone capable, confident, and compassionate. The desert had tested her, challenged her, and ultimately strengthened her. And Cade had been there every step of the way, teaching, guiding, and trusting her to rise to the challenge. As night fell, they returned to the outpost. Rust lay curled between them, and the desert was quiet, save for the soft whisper of the wind through the dunes. Lyra looked at Cade and spoke softly. "I think this is home," she said. "Not just the outpost, but this life. The work we do, the people we help, the lessons we've learned. This is where I belong." Cade nodded, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "Home isn't just a place. It's the people, the choices, and the care we give. You've found your place, Lyra. And together we'll keep building it." Lyra felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of peace she had never known before. The desert, once harsh and unforgiving, was now a place of opportunity, growth, and hope. She had found strength within herself, trust in another, and the power of humanity to thrive in even the most challenging environments. Over the following weeks, the outpost grew. Small groups of travelers arrived, seeking guidance and shelter. Lyra and Cade worked together to help them, teaching them the desert's lessons and showing them the value of cooperation, ingenuity, and kindness. Lyra discovered that her role as a guide was just as important as survival. It was about shaping the future, one person at a time. One evening, as the sun set, Lyra stood on the ridge with Cade and Rust. The desert stretched endlessly before them, vast, beautiful, and full of possibility. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. "The desert has taught me so much," she said softly. "About life, about people, and about myself. I never thought I could find hope here, but I have. And I know we can help others find it too." Cade smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "And that's exactly what we'll do. One step at a time, one person at a time. Humanity thrives because we adapt, learn, and care. And now you're part of that story." Lyra looked out over the dunes, her heart full of hope. She realized that the desert, once a place of fear and uncertainty, was now a place of growth, learning, and connection. She had collapsed here with nothing left, but she had found something far greater: strength, purpose, and a home. As night fell, the stars twinkled above the desert, brighter and more numerous than she had ever seen. Lyra felt alive, capable, and ready for whatever the future might bring. She knew that together, she and Cade could face any challenge, guide any traveler, and continue to thrive in the harshest of environments. The desert had tested them, and they had endured. It had challenged them, and they had grown stronger. And in that triumph, Lyra found not just survival, but hope, courage, and the promise of new horizons. The story of the desert, of the outpost, of Cade and Lyra would continue. Humanity would continue. And in the quiet strength of the desert, life would always find a way. Lyra smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. She had collapsed once with nothing left. Now she had everything she needed: a home, a purpose, and the knowledge that humanity could endure, thrive, and shine, even in the harshest of deserts. And for the first time in her life, she truly believed that the future was full of endless possibilities.